Hey Mike, why are your springs mounted upside down? Are you sure that's a good idea? Oh, hey folks, welcome back to KEI Fabrication. Okay, so I got a bunch of stuff I'm trying to do before the heat comes up. It's 82 degrees in the garage right now, but the humidity's a little low. That's the coolest it's been in like a week. So I'm gonna weld up some of this. What I did was I trimmed off this lip, and I'm going to do the same to this side, only for a little more tire clearance. The other thing I've done, we've been busy making some bracketry. These are going to be the rear spring shackle hangers. I've machined some Delrin bushings to fit in. This will get welded to the rear end housing. Made some front spring hanger brackets that have some adjustability. Front spring hangers are going to go right here, and once I get them welded in place, I'll put some gusseting here to stop them. These are springs only. There's no torque going through these. The trailing arms will be what transmits the forward thrust and the rotation thrust to the chassis. So the leaf springs will be true to the spirit of this vintage race car, and it will have jack and bolts so you can adjust the corner weights and the ride height back here. So alright, I need to beat the heat. I'm going to start welding. Oh, that didn't work. A little better. And those chips are hot. I know you're all saying, why did you drill that hole with that hole saw wobbling so much? Well, I purposely used a hole saw that was smaller than I needed, knowing full well that I had to fine tune the hole to get the position of a piece of tubing that's going through there. So go easy on me. Smell the burning flesh? That was an awesome catch, but man, did it hurt. Alright, it's time to let you in on what's going on here. You saw me hacking away at these things. And I got them on both sides. And what's going to happen is I've got some heavy wall tubing here. This is going to fit through here. And that's going to eventually get welded in place. Well, why are those tubes going there? Well, these are going to push down on the spring, and these are going to get turned down and welded into the bottom of these tubes, and the threaded rod will pass through these nuts. I got long nuts, so I got a long wheelbase. Not a whole lot of force going through this. The vertical forces might be up to 1,500 pounds. So this is like overkill, but you know, it is circle track racing and you want stuff robust. And I'm about to turn down this portion of the coupling nuts that I'm using. And then it'll have a stop that'll bottom out on the tube. That'll get welded in, and what I'm hoping to do is be able to drill through and put a grease fitting in these, and that will help keep the maintenance of the threaded portion of this, because it's welded in. If it gets damaged, it could be a hassle to change it, cutting it out and putting a new one in. So alright, let's get to turning these down. Alright, that was a little painful getting past the points. I knew it was going to be, but I didn't expect it to be that bad. I went through 3 tips on my cutting tools to get it down, and I got another 50 thousandths to go. And on the next one, as crude as that looks, I took the points off down to where we're going to need it. So hopefully it'll take the abuse of that cutting tip off of the tool and allow me to make some time on the next one. Alright, I'll show you when it's done. Alright, well, we got it down to size, and the tube that it's going to fit in, it should end up being like a light press fit, or I might heat the tube up and it should drop right on. So I'm going to knock this one out, and then we'll do them both at the same time, and then we'll just get one weld around to hold it in place. so if you've been watching for a while, this has kind of been my goal for about 3 weeks. It started out with cutting the brackets off the rear end. So I've got a clean sheet of paper to make the new brackets. You saw me disassemble and reseal the rear end and inspect it. It's back under the car. It's at ride height. I have 3-inch blocks between the axle tube and the frame. The pinion angle is set at 0 because the rear suspension brackets and everything. I'll be able to adjust that pinion angle. But I wanted to start out with dead even, so my brackets are all vertical for the lower track bars and the upper linkage as well. So it's centered left to right. A typical circle track of current day, the axle tube on the right side would be much longer, and that would give more left side weight. But for the period, this already does have one axle tube longer than the other, but all that did was offset the weight of the quick change third member itself. It didn't really allow for any extension outside of the frame. So for the maximum amount of tire clearance with the rims bolted on the hubs, I have no choice but to leave it where it is. That's where it was when it was raced in 1969, so that's good enough for me. So left to right, it's equally spaced. It's square in the car, and it is ready to start fabricating brackets from the rear housing axle tubes to locate the rear end via some lower. It's basically going to be a 4-link. That's what it was when it was raced. And also install the spring hanger brackets, the jack and bolts for the springs. So again, I needed to use the chassis and the rear end as a fixture to build the rear end brackets. Again, this is what I wanted to try and do 3 weeks ago, and I ended up going a little deeper into the rear end housing than I wanted to. That's something that was further down the list. It got moved up to the top of the list. That got taken care of, so now I can actually cross that off of things to do down the road. Once I get some bracketry in there and some cross members to hang on to it, I'm going to incorporate a drive shaft hoop and that sort of thing. It's still very important to have that in a circle track car so you don't pole vault the car just like in drag racing. And kind of locate where the transverse cross members are going to be to mount the forward portion of the locating arms or the 4-link bars for this chassis. So it's going to stay in this position for an extended period of time until the brackets are 100% both on the rear axle tube and on the chassis. And this should give me an opportunity to do some fabricating and make some good progress on the back of the car. Alright, I'm running out of time for today, so I'm going to stop here before I get too deep and end up being late for the things we have planned with family. So to avoid that situation, I'll leave you till next time. So I'm about ready to tack the rear spring hanger on and the jack and bolt sleeve. I don't know if you can see the jack and bolt sleeve there. The lighting's not that good, but it goes through the frame. I put a grease fitting on there pointing towards the rear, so you can just open the trunk of the car, hopefully get a grease gun on there and maintain those threads. I've just checked all the angles of the rear end and the offset, finalize its position. The leaf spring is tightened with shims between it to center it in its bracketry. It's centered in the chassis and it's at the right angle, so I'm going to head and tack weld this in with the MIG welder, and then I'll move over to the other side. That'll help when I set this thing down on the ground, it'll actually have some suspension. So I'm pretty excited to get to this point. So let me go ahead and weld those brackets on. Alright, hopefully you can see what's going on now. Get you in a little better position. So the rear spring shackles are going to be behind the axle, cantilevered off of that bracket. I don't know if I mentioned this before or if you watched a previous video on the design of this. What's happening there is the same interaction with the spring forces on the rear end as if a coil spring was pushing down behind the axle tube. So I'm not concerned about that geometry or anything. And then what that does is that allows me to adjust the spring rate of that leaf spring by adding or subtracting longer or shorter leafs. So that's the plan. So I'm going to do a little more tack welding because I'm pretty sure that's the final position of all this, and I don't want it to snap off unexpectedly or change things. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the opposite side. So everything is self-sufficient now and self-supporting. The jack stand's out of the way. I have the ability to adjust the leaf spring mounting from the lower position to the upper position, and who knows what'll work the best. I'm going to actually move everything up to the top hole initially, and if that works great, I will just cut the bottom of that bracket off, or maybe just leave it alone. I don't know. Alright, let's get to the other side. Alright folks, that's it for this time. Remember, if you can't be good, be spectacular.